Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good people. Yeah, you know what it is. Hard worker, scrappy, unfiltered, and sometimes unhinged football content. Hard to explain, but you know it when you see it. Doing it daily our way. I don't know what you're talking about right now. Redraft and Dynasty Fantasy Football, we got you covered. You know their defense is ranked like 31st in the NFL? NFL draft prospects and rookies? Now you know you in the right place for that.
Absolutely.
All right, then stop saying it. Then we're done. And prop bets with my man JRich. Count that money, man. Now wipe the crust out of your eyes. Get you a cup of coffee. It's time to wake your ass up with Ray G. You honestly are making absolutely no sense, and you sound silly as hell.
We are back. Eliot is here. He is bearing with me. I'm sorry, everybody. My power went out and my internet isn't even working. So we're doing this on the Wi-Fi. So hopefully this looks good, sounds good. But Eliot, we were talking about your Jets, and I don't remember where I was with this. I don't know what I was talking about. I was flabbergasted by what happened. But, I mean, the people know this happened before. So we are going to keep the show going on, and you were appreciative enough to continue our conversation. But, you know, we were talking about the Jets, their record, how they're looking. I was talking about how they may not win a game for the first 10 weeks because their schedule is brutal. But I'm just going to get cut to the chase. We have to talk about your boy Elijah Moore and what his outlook is this season. We got asked about it on Twitter. Is he overrated, underrated? He's wide receiver 30 on the finger-looking good PPR rankings. Garrett Wilson is wide receiver 45 consensus, sandwiched between Olave and Sky Moore. How do you feel about Elijah Moore, and can he be the wide receiver one that you so desperately want him to be this season?
I think it's one thing that's really funny is Scott Barrett of Fantasy Points tweeted the other day that his computer has crashed 4 times in the last 2 years, and 3 of them were while he was writing Elijah Moore up. And today, yours crashes right as we're about to talk about Elijah Moore.
Yeah.
I think it speaks to like how much talent he has that like systems can't even process it. No, I think Elijah Moore. Listen, half of this is a bit at this point. I'm just like dedicated to it. It's almost like the Rager thing for Ray G, where like you're in it.
You're so dug in, right? Yeah.
But I still think he's a fantastic value in the 6th or 7th round of drafts right now. Wide receivers going into the year 2 is what we're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about a guy who continued to get better as the season went on. He was the wide receiver 2 overall for that 5-week stretch. He's got his open rate last year was actually 1 spot higher at 9th overall than Justin Jefferson's at 10th. He had the highest yards from scrimmage in his junior year before he exited of any player in the PFF era in the Power 5. So that's since 2000. That's a huge accomplishment. You look at a guy that broke out with A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf on the team. A.J. Brown and Odell Beckham both said, I wish I had this man's talent. He's dynamic after the catch. He gets open consistent. Like, guys who get open, I love. And the Jets should be in situations where they're going to throw the ball a lot. Plus, he's been the star of camp. It's just, he's got so many different metrics that make you excited about everything. And I'm not, like, Corey Davis, I'm not really worried about being a thing. I think Garrett Wilson will continue to develop. But I think you're going to see Elijah Moore have an opportunity for 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns. I think he's got that kind of upside this season, and he's not drafted anywhere close to that. So if he's my wide receiver 3 this year, I'm feeling fantastic.
So then Fizzledall was asking it in the chat, what happens with Garrett Wilson with all this? Does he kind of fall as the wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3? We've seen that in the past, these first-round wide receivers, some of them are great, some of them, Jalen Reagor, not so great. But where does he kind of fall in this offense? Because I think as much as we love all of the individual pieces, we still need Zach Wilson to be really good if they're all going to be fantasy relevant this season. I think to your point, Elijah Moore can definitely be that guy regardless of quarterback play. He's probably the only one that can overcome it through volume. But how do you feel about Garrett Wilson this season and obviously beyond for the Jets?
Yeah, he's mispriced. No one wants to draft him because he's on the Jets. Like, it's one of these situations where he goes in the 11th, 12th round. He's going behind guys that were drafted, I don't know, literally 2 days later than him.
Yeah.
Like 2 days, like Romeo Doubs or Dubes or whatever the hell his name is. I don't care. He's wide receiver 4 on the Packers. You guys can get excited about him all you want. Should not go ahead of Garrett Wilson in drafts. Like, that's absurd. He's the 10th overall pick in a draft. I saw Mike Clay a couple weeks ago said that since the Kevin White draft, all receivers outside of Kevin White who got hurt, who've gone in the top 10, have finished as a top 36 wide receiver. To your
Wow.
point,
In the rookie
Garrett
season?
Wilson, yes.
Whew.
So Garrett Wilson is going like consensus wide receiver 45,
Yeah.
50. Like that's he's priced at his floor. He's a
Yeah.
big time athlete. He's again great route runner. He's going to get enough volume that he's going to be able to pay off that price tag for sure.
No, I'm with you. I think there's a world where he can. I think it's the concerns of this Jets offense and how do they ultimately run. Is Robert Saleh going to really air it out a lot, or do they kind of have a conservative run approach? That's really the only fears I think with them. And obviously, how does Zach Wilson look? Like, I'm curious whether you believe he's actually a franchise quarterback to this point, because as much as we love Zach Wilson, I love the talent, I love the arm, I love the moxie, I love the dog in him. Can he really be that franchise quarterback that we need for fantasy to produce wide receiver ones and wide receiver twos?
Good Lord, do I wish they drafted somebody else, is my answer at the time. I really wanted Justin Fields. I would be so excited about this team right now if they had Fields in terms of his downfield ability with these players would be exciting. I think Wilson he's got tremendous upside. He improved some as the season went along. I think he's still takes a lot of chances with the ball that he shouldn't. I want to make sure that his confidence is there because I think that's the biggest key with him, because when he gets timid, it all goes to hell. Like early last year, he was targeting Tyler Kroft left and right. Stop doing that.
Yeah.
Right? That security blanket, the first guy wasn't open, he would just go to it too quickly. So if he lets these receivers win their routes and gets confidence in the pocket, adding Dwayne Brown, I think, was huge after they lost Mekhi Becton. You know, that offensive line should be solid as well with Vera Tucker and like Tomlinson and George Font. Like that's a solid up front for him. So like if he's not the guy, it's not on the Jets outside of maybe potentially coaching, because the players around him are everything you need to take that next step in year two.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that offensive line, while very young, and especially if they did have Becton, it would be even younger, they do have a lot of upside to your point. And, you know, if they're going to be good, then that means Breece Hall will be good. And Zach Wilson will hopefully have time in the pocket and he's not getting sacked all the time. And that's really the big X factor here is, can that offensive line be good enough to make the Jets a really formidable offense? On defense, we'll see. But you did add Sauce Gardner. And I don't know if you saw this, but Sauce Gardner launched his own line of, I believe it was hot sauce. It's called Sauce, partnered with Buffalo Wild Wings. Eliot, have you purchased any sauce, or will you be purchasing any sauce in the near future?
My wife runs the sauce in this household, so I have no idea. She picks the hot sauce and the barbecue sauce and all that kind of stuff. She clowns me for my taste buds. So.
Your sauce takes?
I did see that Woody Johnson once asked Sauce when he got drafted what kind of sauce he had in his chain. Yeah. And if you ever want to see an awkward interaction, that's one to watch, because Sauce is talking about all the food he had to put different sauce on to make it good growing up to an old white billionaire.
Yeah.
And he didn't really know what to say back about any of it. But yes, I will at some point, if I see it on the shelves, grab it and check it out.
For sure. Now, I want to talk about one of probably the highest anticipated divisions in all of football this season. And I want to ask you, who do you have winning the AFC West? You know, the Chiefs could definitely repeat. They're probably the favorites right now, but with all the talent around them in the Chargers, the Broncos, even the Raiders to some extent, who do you have winning the AFC West, and how do you feel about this division overall?
The division's phenomenal. Every game's going to be must-see television. I think the Raiders' defense is not good enough to compete, even though they got Chandler Jones. They've got just an abysmal secondary, and they were the worst red zone defense in NFL history last year. That's not great. I think losing Tyreek Hill is going to impact this team. You know, you mentioned the Cardinals secondary being awful, but there's a lot of unknown pieces in that Kansas City pass catching game, right? Like Sky Moore, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Juju Smith-Schuster. Like there are more questions than answers, I would say, at this point. But Mahomes is Mahomes. Broncos got a great defense. All that being said, and I'm wearing the Chiefs hat, I'm going with the Chargers. I love Justin Herbert. I think he's a.
That's right.
I had a feeling you'd go there because the talent is just phenomenal on the Chargers right now. It's insane how much pieces they got.
Justin Herbert, I think, is a top 3 NFL quarterback right now. I think because he didn't make the playoffs last year, people are knocking him a little bit. But in that game, he did literally everything you could ever want a quarterback to do to put them in the playoffs. Mike Williams dropped the pass in the end zone. Defense let him down, and Brandon Staley called a timeout. Like the Chargers, if they stay healthy and they finally are on the right side of variance, they have a coach who believes in analytics. They got Khalil Mack, Derwin James fully healthy. They added J.C. Jackson. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Josh Palmer, Austin Eckler, Gerald Everett. Like, this team has all the pieces of a Super Bowl contender with a young franchise quarterback. So I love the Chargers this year.
Yeah, they're going to be disgusting. Their biggest liability was the defensive front and the run game. That Brandon Staley just said, forget it. Run the ball as much as you want. We don't care. But they brought in a pair of DTs to hopefully bolster that defensive line to where maybe even it will be difficult to run on them this season. To your point, Derwin James coming back, J.C. Jackson may allow them to play some more man defense. They could be really, really good, even that division, and still having to play the NFC West on the other side of that schedule. So there's a lot of things working over there. But now, we got to get into the bets a little bit. What is your favorite future that you have at any point in the offseason? You could talk about one now if you want, but I know that you take these lines early. You bet them in May, you bet them in March, you bet them in July. But what's the favorite one that you think you have on the books right now that you got a shot of winning?
George Pickens to lead rookies in receiving yards at 30-1. And now on FanDuel, he's 6-1 as the favorite. He was priced with Daniel Bellinger. And I was boy. I literally saw it. And I was like, did they announce that George Pickens is out like 4 to 6 weeks or anything like that? Because his talent profile is phenomenal, right? The only reason he fell to the second round was the off-field stuff. And Pittsburgh, I know everyone's like, the quarterback situation, but Big Ben sucked last year. And all he did was underneath routes. Like Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, JRich, I don't know about Ray G. Ray G's missing Achilles, but everyone other than Ray G is an upgrade for Big Ben, over Big Ben. So I love Pickens this year. I think he's already going to be the wide receiver 2 over Chase Claypool. And
that seems solidified at this point too. There's
so much variance at 30-1. Like Treylon Burks struggling, Garrett Wilson question marks, right? Like Chris Olave, a lot of competition there. Sky Moore, I think it's gonna be tough for Sky to get to like 1,000.
He's not getting there. There's no way. He's Juju's backup right now, right? So I think to your point, Pickens is a great. Well, especially at the value you got him. I don't know if you saw his Rookie of the Year price jumping ahead of Kenny Pickett, so that was insane. But to have him at 33-1, I mean, you saw that, right?
We need to calm down. If Pickett ends up as the starter.
He's the only quarterback that can win Rookie of the Year this year. I think that's if you want to get into Rookie of the Year. Actually, since we're here, how do you feel about that market? I mean, I haven't looked at it in a while because once I saw Pickens was number one, I'm like, okay, this is dumb. Like no one knows clearly what's going to happen. There's no quarterbacks of consequence because Kenny Pickett isn't the starter. I mean, you're looking at Breece Hall and you're like, how is he going to get there? You're looking at Pickens and saying, well, he could be great, but is the quarterback going to dictate his passing? And, is it going to be good enough? And if Pickett comes in, will they win enough games to where he could be the Rookie of the Year? Cole World's saying Skylar Thompson, there's just no way. You see maybe Kenneth Walker, he's hurt. Garrett Wilson, probably not going to do it. Drake London, maybe, right? But still has to deal with Marcus Mariota. I mean, it's tough out here. Trying to bet a Rookie of the Year has been one of the hardest things. Ray was on Mac Jones last year and obviously lost because Jamar Chase had a historic season. But honestly, at this point, all bets are off for Rookie of the Year, especially Offensive Rookie of the Year, and who it could be. I don't know who's going to win it. Elliot, do you have any idea of who you think could win Rookie of the Year this year?
It's all the reasons you just laid out are why it's so tough, right? Typically, you want to go a quarterback. Running back is another option. Kenneth Walker's probably not going to be it. Now, Breece Hall is splitting time with Michael Carter. I don't know if they're ultimately going to win enough games. Kenny Pickett, I think if he ends up the starter quickly, has a really good opportunity. And the whole argument why I think George Pickens has a good chance to lead rookies in receiving yards is the reason why it's so tough to bet on any of the rookie receivers too for that. So there's also a reason why no one's like 4-1, right? Typically you have a heavy favorite like that. Everyone is in that 9-1 plus category because there's so much variance and uncertainty.
Yeah, and I think the cool thing that we'll see about this year is like when one of those guys has a good game, they'll become the heavy favorite or at least more of a favorite pretty quickly and hopefully add some value down the board. And throughout the season, you can kind of pick and choose your guys as the value shifts and you can maybe get some good bets over there. But, last question I want to ask you because I'm just so intrigued by this question because it came up yesterday. Yesterday, it was brought up that Ray gave you a bet last March for the number one quarterback off the board. Now, someone on our Discord, Evan, was asking us, who do you think the number one quarterback will be off the board in 2023? Last year, you asked Ray directly on Twitter, Ray, who is your number one quarterback off the board in 2023? And he replied, Keaton Slovis. Keaton Slovis was not a great suggestion by old GQ, but we live to see another day. Eliot, do you have a guy that you have pegged to be the number one QB off the board? CJ Stroud is the current favorite to be the number one pick at plus 200 and has to be the favorite right now to be the number one quarterback off the board. Who do you like? Are you familiar with the quarterbacks, and would you be placing this bet at all before the college football season kicks off?
There was a lot to answer there. First, Ray G rarely lets me down. So this one, I think he thought I meant number one quarterback on the transfer board, not draft board.
Definitely. Looked good last night, though. Power to Keaton Slovis.
But ultimately, this is such a tough bet. We were talking a little pre-show about this, is that like the guy who's favored to be the first overall pick rarely ends up as the first overall pick. I think Trevor Lawrence is the only one in the last 8 years to do it. We got CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, both guys with phenomenal profiles on great offenses that are going to look to take that next step forward. To one of the other points we're making that is really tough is that once guys make it, like they're the guy. All we do for that entire year is find reasons why they're not. Like Saquon Barkley is a great example. I know I'm switching to running backs, but everyone was like, he is the guy. He's the best running back prospect in the last 10 years.
Yep.
And then they're like, but he bounced outside, and we find these little. And then what if Ronald Jones is really better than him? Like, this is what we do. We start nitpicking, so it's easier to kind of play that up and coming guy.
Yeah.
I lean CJ Stroud because I think Bryce Young's size is people are gonna pick on that.
100%.
But Will Levis of Kentucky,
10-1.
Typically not a bet I love to make. The thing I like about the draft is that it's really information betting and reacting quickly and knowing who to talk to. Right now is legit gambling.
Yeah.
Like it's not – when I bet on the draft, typically I try to invest in the draft. I try to set up literally a financial portfolio of as many good EV situations as possible. This is just me, well, we're going to do it live. Whatever happens, happens.
Firing bullets. No, you're right, though. Like it's – CJ Stroud should win the Heisman this year, but that doesn't mean he's going to be the number one quarterback off the board. It doesn't mean he's going to be the number one pick. And that's the biggest problem is that if you were to take a bet on number one quarterback, it should be a guy that you think can come out of nowhere, right? The way that Malik Willis really did last season. And while he still wasn't the number one quarterback off the board, he's a guy who really came out of nowhere and people weren't projecting him to be such a high pick. And there was at times people said he could go at 2, he could go at 3, he could go at 4, he could go at 6. So, again, I think it's Anthony Richardson. We've talked about it a lot. It's Levis and Richardson because of the dual threat ability. But, again, to go all the way to number 1, I doubt it. But if you want to say first quarterback off the board, I'm fine with it. I still think that Will Anderson's going to be the number 1 pick in the draft. It just depends on who ultimately has the number 1 pick. You saw this year, like, it could have been a quarterback. But at the end of the day, like, the Jags don't need a quarterback, and no one wanted to take a quarterback high. So it could be Will Anderson number 1. I believe he's 3. I think he's over 3-1. So not a bad bet if you want to take him. He is easily the most talented player in the draft. But number 1 quarterback, I think I would bet on Richardson because of the tools. But again, we saw Trey Lance go 3, not 1. And that's kind of the biggest problem here for me. But so I am kind of with you on that. I don't know if there's anything else you want to touch on. I didn't want to keep you past 9 o'clock. I wanted to thank everybody who came and checked us out in the chat. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties, Eliot, but I really appreciate you riding with me through it all, through and through. You're my dog, and I really appreciate you. Everyone go subscribe to the Fantasy Life newsletter. Go to the other stream and go to the description there because that's where it is. We are on a fresh stream here, but the podcast feed will be in the description there. Eliot, is there anything else you want to say to the people before you leave? I really appreciate you having you on, though, and just rocking with me, hanging out, and I'm excited for Fantasy Life this season.
Thank you. I appreciate that. JRich, I appreciate everything you and Ray are doing, too, moving the industry forward, taking production and the shows to the next level. And this is awesome. Again, head to fantasylife.com. That's super easy to sign up for the newsletter. Just to touch on the last point you made on the draft is that it's not even just the players that are the variables. It's the teams that are the variables. Yeah. And you start having that many variables.
Gambling.
That's a great way to lose money. And it's like you said, Will Anderson's the best player in the draft, dynamic pass rusher. But 3-1, do I really want to tie up my money for 8 months on 3-1 on something that has that many variables? Because if the Lions end up with the first overall pick, he's going to move to like 20-1.
Yeah,
most likely.
Exactly.
So I think there's too much uncertainty, and that's one of the things you really want to do is, and this is something I've talked a lot about on your show, is when you're betting that much uncertainty, you want high odds, because when you're
upside,
certain about
right?
uncertain things, that's how you start getting crushed in betting.
And that is probably the best piece of betting advice you ever give me. If you're certain about uncertain things, that's a great way to blow your bankroll. But Eliot, thank you so much for coming on. Again, everyone, make sure you subscribe to the Fantasy Life newsletter. Make sure you subscribe to our newsletter. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, like this video, and I will see you guys probably on Monday. Ray's going to do a stream for college football for week 1. We are out. Eliot, thank you so much for coming on, and I will see you guys later. I'm out. Peace.